So tell us a little bit about yourself, sir.
So my name is Anthony Joyner. I'm the founder and director of Mulberry Art Gallery. I've kind of been working and selling art for a few years now. Started off with my wife, Dominique, selling a bunch of her work. And then I noticed a big hole in the market when it came to artists of color. And so I eventually ended up starting my own gallery where I provide a platform for artists of color to be able to connect to an audience and sell their work.
Yeah. And if I'm correct, everything here at the Lux, all the paintings that we've been admiring, been viewing all weekend are all part of your gallery. Is that right?
Most of them are.
Okay.
Some of them, like Michael Klein brought in some work, and there's another artist that brought in some work that aren't necessarily a part of the gallery, though I do kind of work with some of these artists from time to time. But a lot of the pieces, like this one by Verlene Mahomes, she's a 70-plus-year-old lady that lives here in Wichita. Yeah.
Hey, we've been this has been our centerpiece all weekend. So we really appreciate the work. To me, it's the epitome of Tallgrass.
Yeah.
You know, if we can't get the Tallgrass logo with the owl, this has now been kind of the pivotal logo that we've had all weekend.
Yeah, for sure. She's amazing. Like this technique and the way it protrudes from the canvas is something that she developed on her own.
Oh, wow.
And she said she got it from a dream. Like God delivered her a dream one night.
Whoa.
And just gave her that technique, and she's been using it for years now.
That's amazing.
Beautiful.
Yeah, it's gorgeous. It really is.
Seriously.
I've been stoked, but let's talk a little bit about the why. So you said your wife is an artist. Was that kind of the foundation for wanting to move forward with a gallery, or what was the message behind starting your own gallery and kind of giving an audience to the local Wichita people in this community?
Well, it started with my wife. Yes, like she was creating art, and it was with her that I realized that most artists are introverts. They don't really like talking to people, so it helps to have someone who can advocate for you and kind of speak for you. But when I moved, we were in Tennessee when we met, but her family's originally from here. She's originally from here. And so we moved back here, and I was doing pop-up shows at a lot of different places. And I realized early on that like we were the most popular in February, Black History Month. And then everything would kind of dwindle out. And usually when we did a show, it was like, yeah, you can do something this weekend or you can do something this week. But once that's done, then you got to leave. Mm-hmm. And I was going through so many different spaces that I didn't see Black and brown artists on the walls, and it bothered me. So I began to ask questions. Why? And I found some reasons on both sides. CVs and resumes are very important, but also just that a lot of organizations just didn't pay attention to the fact that that wasn't happening. And that's when I discovered that Black art makes up less than 2% of the market.
Oh, wow.
Literally, the last study that was done in Washington showed 1.2%. And that's a huge problem. And then I immediately decided to take action. I'm not a person that likes to just sit and complain about what's going on. If I see a problem, I like to attack it. And the only way to attack a problem like that is to be aggressive. And that's what I did. I opened that gallery. I knew of several artists in the community that were amazing artists like Miss Mahomes, whose work I didn't see in a lot of different spaces. So I brought her on and gave them a space.
That's powerful. So how has it been received? Obviously, you kind of talk about that. How has it been received locally by the community?
Wichita has been very, very helpful in everything that's been going on. They've been on board with us from the very beginning. I did a GoFundMe in the beginning just to kind of gauge how people would receive it. And we raised a little bit of money there, around $2,000. And then from there, I began talking to other people in the community, and we ended up getting sponsored by Fidelity Bank. And it's just, the community has been very receptive.
That's awesome.
This.
Yeah. That's so cool. Was that kind of, and maybe this, and I apologize if it comes across this way, but did you expect that?
I didn't know what to expect.
Okay,
honestly,
sure.
Coming into this, because to me, when I walk into a space and see certain people being excluded from what I see there, to me, and with anyone who has received racism, who has been someone who has been on the opposite end of racism, it's always like, is it intentional, right? Mm-hmm. And there were instances where early on where I was doing pop-up shows where I, received some less than desirable results, like in a space where I was told, I don't think you're going to attract the kind of people that I want to see here, or something like that. So those are things that are going to stick with you, right? But at the same time, I knew that there were several other people in the community that were extremely helpful, that provided a lot of advice. So I really came into this not knowing what to expect, but knowing that I wasn't going to stop. And that was just my thing. No matter what happened, I wasn't going to stop. So
that's amazing. I think we've seen some of this awesome art, but I want to take. So when you say the 1%, all this, what constitutes that type of art? Like when you say it's just 1.2%, I think like African American art or black art,
well, that's
brown.
with museums included.
So what defines that? What I now identifies it as a black or brown art, as you mentioned a moment ago?
It's about the artist.
Okay,
that's what it's all about. So it's the demographic of the artist. And because a lot of people create art where it's like, oh, this is a brown skinned person, right? But it's not a brown skinned person that developed the art.
Oh, sure.
And so we're just talking about the race of the person that actually did the piece.
Yeah, because that's one thing that I was kind of confused by, and talking with some people around here. You can see some of the art and you see the faces, you see the images. I will be perfectly honest, and I assume that was done by an African American person,
right?
And then I meet the artist in a gallery, and it's just like, okay, it's not in any way what I had expected, and it's very interesting. We've been having this social commentary off camera with that call to action. I think that's the biggest thing I kind of heard you say. Why did you kind of challenge it? Why did you take that action upon yourself in this community to really be that voice and obviously be that person to bring that to the center?
Well, for me, it was really the artists, the different artists in the community. What I did from the very beginning was when I brought in my wife to kind of help her get exposed to the art scene here, I connected with a woman named Janice Thacker, and she was doing pop-up shows all around the city. She's amazing. She's an older lady, but she runs at 100 miles an hour. And so I was running behind her and doing the pop-ups with her. And while I was doing this, I was talking to the artists. I don't like the idea of people providing solutions and just throwing them at people. I wanted to talk to the artists. So I was like, okay, I don't see any black art on this wall. Why? And so I talked to the people in charge, and then I talked to the artists, and I'm like, why don't I see your work at such and such? And they're like, well, we don't think they really accept our type of art. Or I'll run into one artist where, an older guy here, amazing art that tells true stories, and he's like, I've been told by a couple of these places that they don't want to show my work, that it's not good enough. And I'm like, what? So for me, I've just always been the type of person that challenged the system. I've since I was a kid, I grew up a little rough. I was adopted, and there were a few undesirable things in my early childhood, and there were so many instances where I was just saying, I wish someone had taken action. I wish someone had lended a hand. And that kind of instilled in me that thing where it's like, if I see a problem, I can't just stand by idly. And sometimes that works to my detriment. Sure. But in cases like this, it really helps. I don't want to sit by idly while there's something out there that I can do.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's a beautiful sentiment and a beautiful call to action. That's it. You are making a difference, and you're saying, again, people can sit all day with words, but it's actions that really get things done. You know what I mean? And I like that you took that upon yourself to say, I'm going to make this space. I'm going to give you this opportunity. I want this. I want to see this. I'm tired of waiting and asking other people to do it. Yeah. Let's do it. Because
it goes even deeper than just them being able to show. What you have to understand is, when you have black artists or brown artists, and you tell them, hey, you're going to go into this white space, and this is your only opportunity to show your work, right? So there's little representation. When you tell these artists that, first of all, they feel like they have to adapt to what's going on.
Oh, sure.
So I've had an artist, he's over 60 years old, and he's like, I kind of dumbed down my work so that I don't offend the audience. And so now with me doing this, which is another reason that I said it has to be me and it has to be a gallery, I get to tell these artists, you don't have to dumb it down. I want you to say what you truly feel. And now, like he's saying, oh, okay, I'm going to the garage right now. I'm setting up all my supplies and I'm painting something totally new, because now he has that freedom to say what really happened. Because he was on the Wichita baseball teams back when, you know, the leagues were segregated, and he played baseball, and he had some experiences from back then that you just don't see anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
You don't get the chance to actually live through those people. And most of these people that went through a lot of this stuff, they're older, right? They're in their 60s and 70s. If we don't get what they truly experienced on something that we can pass down for generations,
sure.
we're going to lose it.
Yep.
Well, I think piggybacking off of that, that was going to be one of the questions I asked, because do you see a difference in the generations? Right? You talk about, you know, the 60, 70-year-olds. Do you see a completely different mindset with some of the younger artists that you work with?
Absolutely.
How does that change? Like, what's the difference between artistically what a painting might be for someone in their 60s or someone that's up on your wall in their 20s? Do you see visually a huge difference, or is the message on the canvas different?
I think the message is a lot different. With a lot of younger people, they tend to they start off with anime, right? Whereas, you know, these older people, they didn't have anime when they were growing up, right? So they start off with anime, and because they start with anime, it influences their work later on in life as well. The way they utilize color, the way they utilize texture, all of that is kind of determined by where they started out. In addition to that, a lot of these older people have very much deeper stories to tell. You know, they have stories that if you didn't grow up in the Deep South, then you don't necessarily understand it. And for a lot of times, I'll see where an older person will put something on a canvas, and then a younger person will realize, I experienced that, but I didn't compartmentalize it that way. I didn't see it the way that it shows on this canvas until now. So the stories are usually very different. Younger people tend to want to paint celebrities once they start actually getting into it, or something that influenced them from television or something like that, as opposed to a lot of older artists tend to lean more toward real life.
Sure.
Like what's happening to me or what happened to me.
So is it, in that aspect, then, is it very cathartic for them to convey some of the experiences that they had and then put it to canvas? Like what the story you mentioned of, no, I'm going to go back in my garage. Is that now a cathartic experience of them being able to process through some of the emotions or some of the experiences they had growing up in this environment?
I think it's more or less, it's more about the opportunity to tell the younger generation that this existed.
So more educational then.
Yeah. I think that's what a lot of them are leaning toward. I don't doubt that some of them are more like, you know, I just want to have this out there. I just want to express this. But I think for a lot of them, it's just making sure that their stories are not forgotten.
Sure.
And I think that's something that's very important. And you see that a lot in museums, right? But
Sure.
I think it's important for galleries to do that too, because what we end up running into is, especially since we don't have a lot of representation for Black and brown artists, you end up running into a lot of instances where people like this, like she has a basement full of artwork. She has literally sculpted an entire, like this, it's a 3-dimensional sculpture of Jesus.
Oh, wow.
With fiery eyes and woolly hair and brown skin. She has sculptures of angels, and they're made from stuff like what you see on here.
So like full of just textures.
Yes. And you know, I think that, but when you run into an instance where you don't get a lot of representation in galleries and things like that, these people don't make it to museums. They get forgotten, and nobody knows the stories that they've been trying to tell. So I think that's more or less what it is. Like,
and with that, like, why, if you could add like the commentary too, why? When you say they're forgotten or they don't make it there, what is the reasoning behind that?
So there are a few different reasons. One of the main reasons is you have to realize that literally we were considered human 60 years ago, just over 60 some years ago. It was when we were allowed to be just a part of society with having the same rights as everyone else. That means that back in the 60s and 50s, our artists did not have the opportunities to get into galleries. And when you, let's say as an example, if you were to have that entire back of the building cut off right now, right? And throughout the entire first portion of the day, that side of the building is cut off to children. Later on, when you open that door just a little bit, children are still going to be hesitant to go back there because you've been telling them that they can't go back there this whole time.
For sure.
So that's the same thing that kind of happened with us. Like, we have been told all this time that we couldn't get into galleries. Now, all of a sudden, when we do get civil rights, when we do get the opportunity to get into galleries, it doesn't mean that we're going to come running. We're still a bit hesitant. Not only that, but a big misconception that people have is that when they passed the Civil Rights Act, everything changed. But that's not the case, right? It still took a lot of cities and states a very long time to even adopt the Civil Rights Act or to even abide by it. Mississippi abolished slavery in 2013. So with that being the case, a lot of these artists still were not trying to get into these galleries, so they didn't follow the processes that these galleries look for. Galleries look for CVs. Galleries look for, like, you have to have a proper artist resume, right? You have to know how to write your own show, right? There's so many things that these artists did not care to learn because this didn't pertain to them.
Sure.
So for a lot of these older artists that I'm looking at, and I'm like, okay, where's your CV? And they're like, oh, I don't have a CV. Why would I need a CV? And when I ask them for their portfolio, right, they just show me their art. They don't have a portfolio. So that's one of the things that, it's when you talk about systematic racism, that's something that has affected a lot of our artists. Yeah. So that's one side of it. But then there's also the idea that, in all honesty, a lot of the art that's created by Black and brown artists are not considered up to the proper standard for a lot of places. I have a lot of artists that will take their work, and it's amazing work to us, into a gallery, and they'll be told that it's not up to standard, right? To some form or some extent. That's kind of what they get when they leave that space. So if that's the case, like as an example, Charles Davis, if you all have not seen his work, you need to look it up. It's amazing. He has a painting where there's a guy sitting in a barber chair. There's a kid sitting in a barber chair, and there's a barber that's cutting his hair, and the barber's on the phone at the same time. When Black people walk in and they see that painting, they feel that, because the barbershop for Black men was a place of relative safety. It's where we could go in and get away from our wives. It's where we could go in and get away from the outside world. We could crack jokes. We could talk about sports. We could say whatever we wanted in that safe space, right? We don't exactly have a lot of those anymore. When we saw that, that was like, oh my God, I'm so happy that's here, right? But when he takes that to another space, they kind of look at that like, it looks okay, but I don't think I'm going to be able to sell that. I don't think I'm going to be able to make any money from that. So there's a lot of different sides.
It creates a barrier to entry.
Exactly.
And that's a really fascinating perspective, and I love this conversation mainly because it does parlay into one that we've had throughout this film festival all weekend long, which has been creating a barrier to entry discourages art.
Yes.
You know what I mean? It discourages artists. And if there's anything that I would hope, and I do hope, and clearly you're making a difference in, is encourage, like, if anything, we need to encourage the art community of all walks of life, because once art stops being made, we're all in trouble.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Once those stories stop being told, once people stop communicating things, and we're just left with whatever will sell or whatever a group of people have decided people want to see, then that becomes a problem, because then everything you're taking in is coming from a certain homogenized perspective. You know what I mean? So that's a really wonderful thing to hear. I think it's something that I've been really impressed with the several times that I've come to Wichita about. And it's really nice to hear you say that Wichita has been, very helpful in the process of this. Is one thing that I've noticed, and I've felt, and I think Tallgrass does as well as a film festival, is the community it creates feels like it lowers that barrier of entry. Yeah. You know what I mean? It puts everybody on a kind of same level where everybody can talk and have these conversations and share ideas and get excited and be passionate about things together.
Absolutely.
And that's really, really exciting. And I love to see that. And I'm really glad that you came to sit with us and talk to us about what's going on.
I'm happy too, man. I'm glad you all invited me over. And if I could say one more thing that we do.
Yeah, of course.
We also have a program called Meet the Challenge, where we bring in young artists, because we understand that, like, you can't just start at the top, right? So we bring in young artists between the ages of 13 and 18, and we allow them to be mentored by artists that are in our open studio space. These artists that we have over there, they get free space, and in exchange, they kind of help us with the mentoring and different things like that. So,
well, I think you're amazing. We're going to do our best. I think, my immediately when Q was talking about it, to me, art always invoked emotion.
Yeah.
For you, art invokes action, right?
Sure.
And I think that's the biggest thing we've talked about, call to action. Your art calls for action, and I'm so stoked to see, you know, how this meet the challenge, I believe was what you're trying to do. There's no doubt with a spokesperson like yourself, I can only imagine the force that your wife is as well, but the partnership that you two have and the community here in Wichita that's going to be able to continue to funnel the message that you guys are going to be able to convey. Absolutely amazing. Dude, you are awesome. Absolutely amazing. You're such a nice dude. I really appreciate you sitting down with us. But for all the people that are watching, but more importantly, as we distribute this after we leave Tallgrass, how can people, you know, get involved with the Meet the Challenge or continue to support your gallery as well?
So we have, our website is mulberrygallery.com. Should be really easy to find. We have an option there for you to either join our Patreon or to donate directly to the gallery, or you can come down to the gallery, buy some artwork from some of these artists. We're located at Revolution, which is 2721 East Central Avenue here in Wichita. So you can pop in, buy some art, and get involved. We also do several different events that people can come out to, paint parties and things like that as well.
That's awesome, man.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah.
Well, much appreciated. Thank you so much. I think what you're doing is amazing, and I definitely want to see it succeed as much as we can help. And any platform that we have, you're more than welcome to. So
I appreciate it.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it. You're awesome.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you.
Thank you.